the first thing I want to say is that people tend to see codes of conduct and business excellence approaches as two different pieces, and I think they're inextricably interlinked. And I think the whole process is foundationed on on a basis of um, values, the expression of those values, execution of those values, and then how you move those values across. In fact, if you look at any business excellence model, it starts with talking about values, and values often include stakeholders, and then there's a concept of balancing across stakeholders, and then there's the concept of doing better, and it's usually seen in the context of comparison with competition, and that competition could be it could be local, it could be regional, it could be national, it could be global. And the important way that it helps frame you think about it is, um, if you are not the best, then are you closing the gap with the best? Whoever the best is in the context that you are viewing it at that point in time. So if you're looking at your best local competitor, then are you improving and closing the gap? If you happen to be the leader, are you widening the gap? And over a period of time, are you doing things better and differently that make the changes that you need happen? I think business excellence and ethical conduct are inextricably connected, because at the end of the day, I believe every human being has a moral compass, and that moral compass wants to sort of align itself, but there are pressures of all sorts from different areas, and often organizations make the mistake of having KRAs which are very distinct, separate, and not holistic at all, which pit people against each other. And there are various schools of thought. There are some schools of thought that believe that that kind of friction is good. It brings out the best. I'm from the school of thought that believes that if you evangelize appropriately and correctly, and I'm talking about evangelizing your values and your approaches to things, then you'll get people aligned. And once people are aligned, their willingness to cooperate and collaborate and build on each other, um, with their ideas as well as their execution, is remarkable. And so I'm of that school of thought. There is another school of thought which also uses excellence as an approach, but which is sort of in a way committed to the friction aspect, pitting people against each other. And there are many companies that use this sometimes to good effect as well. I tend to think that the latter is far more stressful and does not breed institutions, it breeds combat. So that's where my head is on that subject. So now, directly getting to your point on why do you do more than the law? I think because the law is the lowest common denominator that you absolutely must have to abide by. But your values need not only be framed in legalistic terms, they can be framed in terms, of course, being on the ball legally is essential. And anyone who's worked with me would know that I'm anal and pedantic about that stuff. But I think it goes beyond that. It goes into belief systems. It goes into humanitarianism. It goes into idealism. It goes into philosophy eventually. I think a code of conduct has to be top down. It has to be bottom up. It has to be side to side. It has to be all over the value chain. And at the end of the day, it has to touch everybody outside the organization, whether they're a customer or just society observing your organization in action. And it has to touch everyone internally, whether it's the individuals who work together or their family members or even the relatives of their family members, because the creation of that institution is what makes a brand, and that institution has a personality that if everyone involved with it embodies, it becomes it gets more institutionalized, to put it simply. Okay, let me take a step back. There are once again, I think, two types of outlooks. There's an outlook that wants to create institutions and build capability for the long term. And there's an outlook that wants to win in the short run. Unfortunately, the stock market kind of pushes the latter, but there are many people who manage to function within the ambit of the quarterly results phenomenon and still push a long-term agenda. So it's a matter of managerial skill, how you actually are able to do that. I think the simple reason is that you get performance if you encourage your people to excel, and I think excellence is an attitude, like I said. So if you've always got people thinking about how to collaborate to do better together and to be the best, whether they achieve that or not, it's not a destination, it's a continuous journey. That I truly believe, and I've seen that in action, actually. I mean, I was a part of a company which was at one time in 1991, it was told, and this company I can name, I'm very privileged to have been a part of it and proud to have been a part of it. It's Tata Steel. In 1991, there was a consultant's report that said you're in such bad shape, you'll have to close down. In 2001, literally 10 years later, World Steel Dynamics and CRU, which were at that time, and I think probably still are, the two rating agencies for the steel industry, concluded that it was the best steel plant operations in the world. And they didn't conclude that lightly. They had a few people wandering about in the company for months before coming to that conclusion. And they did that assessment in a similar way with all the steel companies and steel plants. And they did it at an integrated steel plant level. So you might be in a company that has multiple units, but one of them is really excelling and the other one is not, and that would show up too.
Yeah.
So it's the same people who were there when it was falling apart, and was pretty much the same people, barring new recruits and retirees, who 10 years later, that company was amongst the best in the world, for sure. And I think since then, its Jamshedpur operations continue to be amongst the top steel operations in the world. And it's because of the systems that got built and that attitude of excellence that got built. And of course, there are systems and processes. The danger with business excellence is that it becomes a bookish clause and model kind of thing. And that I don't think works, because people pay that lip service and then carry on with their daily lives. Whereas what works is if you genuinely kind of lead in that direction and encourage people to align in that direction in a constructive way. I think if you look, for example, at the Tata Group, you'll see that many of the companies that are, industry leaders in the group, or at least significant, we talked about from scale to significance. I think you'll see that many of them have actually used that to good effect. Equally, I would say there are many that have not used it to good effect. But I recall at least two Tata CEOs who were recruited externally. I won't name them or their companies. When I was involved in this process, who came and told me that using it has enabled them to get the results that they've got. And I think there are many people in the group who would still believe that. Unfortunately, I also think that these things tend to be faddy, and then there are processes, and then if the process is not handled in the right way, it can become something that is been there, done that, done by rote, and then it loses its effectiveness, not because it's inherently not okay, but because everyone gets fed up of it and bored with it and plods along through it as if it's something that just needs to be done, as opposed to getting value out of it.